I don't know, Gary. I asked the patrons and they told me they wanted more orcs. But they also said terrain. I know they also said terrain. What if we did Ork Terrain? Wag! Welcome back to the Red Ones Go Fasta. I'm old Big Mek, and in this episode, we're finally doing some work. So, yes, this video is going to be about the next project, and that project was picked by our patrons on Patreon. Basically, I gave them the rundown of what I had up on the docket next, and they got to pick what they wanted to see, and that was overwhelmingly in favor of terrain. And so that is what we're going to talk about today. Now, I've already done a video on terrain as far as buying it and like recommendations for it and stuff like that, and I'll link that. There should be a little eye thing either up there or up there. It'll also be down in the description below, just kind of talking about what terrain to buy and best deals and things like that. This video is totally different. What we're doing today is looking at some of my personal terrain projects, trying to get some done, and moving the pile of opportunity forward, so to say, like we did with my orc army for Orktober. So I'm going to go dig out all my terrain, and we'll set it all up, see what we've got, and then I'm going to dig out all my unbuilt terrain. We'll set it up, see what we've got, and then we'll see what happens from there. All right? Let's get into it. Yeah, so the long and the short of it is, what I basically have is a little over half of the Octarius terrain as far as the buildings go. I've got 2 of the 4 main buildings built, painted, done, as well as a full set of the barricades and the little scatter pieces and the Mek Boy workshop, along with the big skull thing. I forget what it's called. This one, the Big Ed Boss Bunka. So I've got a Big Ed Boss Bunka. It's built, painted, done. I've got the full Mek Boy workshop built, painted, done, which is the same set of scattered terrain and barricades as Octarius, and then half of the Octarius stuff. What I have is the other half of Octarius, its actual scatter terrain and stuff, and then a set of the terrain from one of the original Kill Team boxes that is kind of built and undercoated and primered, and then this really cool bridge, and a couple of other random pieces. So basically what it comes down to is I don't really have enough for a full-size Warhammer battle yet, especially not fully painted. The orc stuff that I do have is cool for like a setup and maybe like a smaller game. You could do like a 1,000-point game on the half-size board. It would be a little bit of a loose battlefield, but it would be a battlefield. But to do a full-size board and, 2,000 points aside, I don't think I could get there right now. Now, if I add in all my primered stuff, you could have like a Mechanicus fort on one side and the Orc fort on the other. You could probably get a game in, but I own enough to actually make it work and work well and work right. So I think what I need to do is concentrate on building the rest of the terrain. That way tomorrow I can primer the stuff that's built, and then tonight I can work on the stuff that's primered and maybe get some painting done. So let me show you what kind of shape it's in. All right, so over here at the workbench to kind of show you a close-up of what we're working with. This is one of my Octarius pieces that is completely done. You can see it's fully painted, it's weathered, I've got detailing going on, I've got my lights lit up with my gloss clear paint from Tamiya, I've got all my wiring done in flat black, I've got the inside painted as well. even the underside of the roof, the top side, everything is done to a way that makes me happy. This is what I want my Ork fort to look like. Some of the other pieces, such as the scatter train, I've gone even further on for more detail because they do have different bits here to pick out. So I've got, these ammo boxes and control boxes in a green. I've got a chipped up yellow tank there. You can see it's an old Megatrack scrapjet on its side there. So I've got, the paintwork on it and the chrome exhaust. I've got some really good rust effects here in the corrugated iron. And then my tires being very flat and rubbery looking, along with the weathering on them, contrasting very nicely with the true metallic metal on the mechanical bits. I really, really like these scatter trains. So I have a full set of these done to this standard, and I have 2 of these buildings done to this standard. Now the next set that I have is this Mechanicus terrain. This is from one of the original Kill Team box sets, and I did some real messing around with these with my airbrush. Now, I say airbrush, my airbrush is at least 30 years old, and I'm no good at it. I've maybe airbrushed 10, 12 times in my whole life. And this was the latest attempt, and that was probably a couple of years ago. You could see I get splatter effects everywhere. I've got different levels of gloss on here. I'm not real happy with the undercoat on that particular one. This one actually turned out halfway decent. I can work with this with a bunch of oil paints and weathering and make this look pretty cool. So I have these set of smokestacks on a bunch of little smaller ones and some of this tubing stuff. Now all of that combines with, well, this monster here. This is basically one walkway piece with a big tank thing underneath it that is pretty darn cool. I did mold it, build it with the door open. I followed the instructions to the T on this, and I really hate that I did that. If I had to do it over again today, I would definitely have my ladders in different positions. I wouldn't actually glue this deck to this so that I could rearrange it as needed. But at this point, everything is firmly put together and I am stuck with it. The other thing that makes that annoying is that the instructions had you do this little L-shaped piece that's really stupid looking with the ladder on it. I'm sure they were going for a very specific Kill Team thing, and I thought I was going to play Kill Team and followed it. So yeah, I kind of regret these. In fact, I might just rip them apart. Upon further reflection, that's not going to happen. So these are built with these little stud things in the bottom and then these joiners that glue them together. And this was all glued together with plastic glue. So this is all truly melted together. That's not coming apart anytime soon without completely destroying it. So as far as the basic shape goes, that is stuck. Now, same thing with like this ladder. It's got a single peg right here going in. Now I could cut this and glue the ladder somewhere else, but it's not going to be nearly as strong as it is now. So I think I'm just going to have to live with this one being kind of dumb. Now the last piece of primer terrain I have is interesting. It is this bridge. I have tried to find this thing online so I could share it with you all so that you could get one for yourself, because it's not actually a Warhammer piece, even though it totally looks like it. The scale is perfect for Warhammer. The Lehman Rust just looks amazing on here. In fact, let me go grab it. See what I mean? It is right on the tank tread. So it is perfectly scaled for Warhammer 40,000. It's got that lovely brutalist look to it. It just fits in perfectly. The only thing I did to jazz it up was glue literally one random Mechanicus emblem on it, and it totally looks like legit GW. It's got the nice thick plastic to it too, which really matches with the 40K aesthetic. Unfortunately, there are literally no markings on this contraption anywhere, and no amount of Googling could reveal it to me, nor can I find the box that it came in. So, unfortunately, I have not found this. And finally, we get to my newest acquisitions, which are just built, but not primed or anything. I've got a couple of the Mechanicus containers, so I bought these used. This one is all glued together. This one is glued together minus one door, so you can see the inside. However, the door is missing, but that's fine. And then I also have one more of the tops for the plasma vents to match my other Mechanicus terrain. So, that's what I'm working with. Those of you that have been watching my videos for a while have probably seen this little guy in the corner of the desk evolve over time, but not really go anywhere. This is an old rhino that I have been turning into a piece of terrain. The idea is that it crashed in a battlefield of old, and it has since been taken over by Imperial Guard and built a trench around it. So eventually I'm going to get some foam, actually crash this thing into the foam. There will be a hill on this side, on the front, and right here, all impacty looking, and then trench kind of coming out of this side and out of the back, with the idea being that this opens and closes, and then the trench network kind of comes in here, and it's like a little command node for Imperial Guard. It's a very slow burn project. Basically, when I need something to fiddle with and clear my mind, I work on this kind of over here in the corner. But that is a very long burn project. Now, I also have a Into the Dark Kill Team set, which has the full set of terrain for the inside of the Gallowdark, the Space Hulk. And that's just all new in the box, still waiting. That's not what I'm going to work on here. Other than that, the only other terrain I own is 3D printed. Eons of Battle does terrain packs now for their patrons, and they're really, really cool. They've got some that haven't been my thing, but they've got some that have been really cool. And they did an Octarius expansion to add more buildings to it that all worked with the shape that they were, so that you could rearrange them, along with a stage for the Goth Rocker and all that. Now, I had somebody 3D print them for me out of resin. And to be honest, the quality isn't great. And I don't think that that has anything to do with Eons of Battle. I think that it has to do with my 3D printer guy that I had do it. Some of the pieces are immaculate. They are beautiful and wonderful and look just like the GW stuff. And some of them look like garbage. And that project and my long-term project and this Mechanicus terrain, I've come to a realization. And that's part of the reason why I haven't gotten a lot of this terrain done, is that it doesn't really call to me, right? It doesn't light my fire. It doesn't get me going. It's not inspiring of like, oh man, this is really cool. Now, when Octarius came out, it was incredibly cool and I loved it and I had to have it. And as soon as I got one, I ripped it open and I built that terrain and painted it and loved it. I don't know why I didn't build all of it. I think it's because at the time I was hung up that it was two sets of identical pieces and I didn't want identical pieces. And then I had already had all that scatter terrain and barricades built and painted from the Mech Boy workshop. And I didn't want identical pieces. That's just not my thing. I don't do identical stuff anywhere in my army. And then I've got Imperial Guard with 100 soldiers in it, and not any two of them are identical. It's just my thing. So I had come up with this idea of I was going to chop up the barricades and the other two buildings and glue them all back together in a different way so that they weren't identical pieces. But that never happened from there. The same thing with the Mechanicus terrain, but in a different way. It's not that they weren't that they were identical or anything. It's that I built them following the instructions and then didn't like the way they turned out. And then that made me just not really want to play on them or build them or paint them. And I think that that's been a big part of a lot of my pile of shame projects is I get something thinking it'll be cool, start on the project, realize that it's not turning out how I wanted it to, or it isn't what I thought it was going to be, and then I kind of give up on it. Whereas other projects that are as amazing as I think, like the Big Ed Boss Bunker. I love the Big Ed Boss Bunker. I'm going to go get the Big Ed Boss Bunker. I love this thing. So when this was announced 2 Orktobers ago, I went out and bought it right away. And if I remember right, it literally was released in October. And I built it in the same day I bought it. And then I want to say it was fully painted maybe a couple of days later. And I mean, it's painted well. I've got, my tires are all nice and flat. I've got leaks from the plasma vents. I've got all sorts of awesome chipping and rust effects on it, welding things. The inside of the top I really like. I got different kind of staining going on in there. I've got my shouting pole done up with my orange, and then all the little big shooters, right? And I built it where you can pop them off and pop them on, and they all work on all the different corners. And then same thing with the shouting pole. You can have it on or not, depending on whether or not you want to use it. And I've even used this thing in quite a few games, both as the actual fortress thing. Fortification, that's the word I'm looking for. And also just as a terrain piece to have cool terrain on the board. So when I get something, terrain or not, but specifically terrain in this video, when I get something and I build it and it works and I like it, I paint it right away and it's awesome. And if I don't, then I don't, and it literally sits around for years. So the realization that I've come to is when it comes to Warhammer projects, make sure it really does it for you and lights your fire. And if it does, you're going to build it and paint it right away and love every second of it. And if you're not loving it, maybe instead of shoving it in the corner or muddling on with it, could be a good idea to just let it go right away, cut your loss before you're in too deep, or figure out what it is about it that's bothering you so that you can fix it and move on. Right? And that's exactly what happened with me. So I loved these barricades when they came out in the Big Mek workshop. Built them, painted them, absolutely loved them, have played games with them, display with them, etc. But now I have a second set from Octarius, right? And they're literally, oops, I put them the right way around. They're literally identical, right? And so how many Ork barricades are going to have exactly the nose of a scrapjet and the hood off of a Rucka Truck squig buggy like that, right? Like that just rings untrue to me. And so I definitely see why I haven't done this, that I want to chop these up and rearrange them to make different barricades because that's more orky. So I think that's what I'm going to do. All right, so we're back over here in the workshop. I've got the rest of my pile of Octarius terrain here, along with the original instruction booklet for it, and I realized that I'm actually forgetting about a couple of pieces of terrain. There's supposed to be a couple of these kind of random connector pieces that go up like that with a tire on them, so I'm going to do something with those maybe to start. All right, so here's a thing that I've run into is this Octarius terrain is all designed to fit together. That includes these pieces. That's actually supposed to go right there. So when you put the whole fort together, it's got somewhere to be. So I can't actually cut this apart and rearrange it if I still want this thing to work as designed. All right, so I managed to build one of the buildings now, and I totally see what I was thinking back in the day, and that was going to be to chop off some of these pieces here on the top, maybe glue a barricade on the top, chop the barricade into pieces, replace pieces with it, and that's how I could make this work and look like a different piece. But now I realize that it's not really the top that bothers me so much, it's these sides. You see, you've got these same glyphs on the other side, the same exact door, and then same thing with the inside. It's all identical. And I realized that I can actually change a lot of that with painting, so I don't think I need to get as crazy as I think to make these particular pieces look different. These, however, do still need something done. All right, I have made quick work of this piece of scatter terrain with the X-Acto 234 saw. This thing is absolutely a Big Mek's best friend when it comes to ginormous plastic pieces like this. The long and the short of it, though, is now I have this piece that I can add to the wall in a way that is going to give me some extra detail and then not be the same piece of scatter terrain. So I just got to clean up where my edge is going to be, figure out where I'm going to put it on the bunker. All right, I've been letting my inner Big Mek fly, and I've cut this one apart as well, thinking that maybe I can squeeze this one in here somehow, bolt them together. Same thing with this. I can now kind of do this or take these pieces and put them on here. So I am going to continue to cut until I have pieces that I can glue. All right, so tech tip when you're building any terrain, but especially the Octarius terrain, you see these little nubs right here where my thumb is? That's where it attaches to the sprue. If you look at it like this, you can see it actually sticks out a little bit. that makes it not work correctly. You see, it fits into the receiver here in this piece, and when you put them together, that little nub makes it stick out just enough that the top plate here doesn't want to sit correctly. So definitely trim those off. Same thing with the top plate. You can see right here it's got these little nubs on it. You want to get all of those trimmed off so that this piece fits correctly. Here's the after with the nubs trimmed and the mold line scraped, and you can see I'm now perfectly flat on the side here. And when I go into the receiver slot, I fit all the way in nice and snug on both ends all the way down so that my top plate will fit correctly. And like that, we've got a wonderfully fitting piece of terrain all glued together correctly. Alright, so the result of my night of Big Mecking, I have my whole fort here, and I'm actually going to do a whole video just on the Octarius fort and all of the cool things that this does when I paint it. So we will save that for later and come over here to the workbench where I will show you what I ended up doing with the barricades. So I did end up cutting them apart and gluing them back together in a different order. So this is 3 of the pieces cut apart and re-glued together in a different order. And as you can see, I went for the typical corner piece because all the other ones are straight. And I figured that just like when you're doing your regular troops, even if they have all the same equipment and everything, if you do a different pose, they look different. So if I put these in a different order and make them a different pose and make them a corner instead of a straight, they will look different. Same thing with this one. I'm really happy with how these pieces went together. I was able to chop right along the grill there and right along the piece of corrugation there, put them together, and I mean, they are just meant to be. So this little corner piece turned out fantastic. This one I ended up, so I cut this edge off and I kept trying to figure out where to glue this thing. And then I realized, you know what? That one stands really well on its own. So this is going to be a little piece. This is going to be a corner piece. And then this is the big corner piece I made. I do like the way it looks, especially this side. I don't like that it is an acute angle. That just, I don't know. It's not working real well. I put one of the tires from the columns, these guys in there. But it does work, and honestly, you know, it's pretty orky. It's not like we do things in right angles anyway, and it does look, you know, totally different than the other pieces, and really that's what I was going for. And now with them all set up with the 3 straight pieces that are done as original, you can see you can make kind of your own little squig yard here, and it looks right. It looks good. All of the pieces look different. And yeah, they do work well together. And of course, you can rearrange to your heart's content and, you know, figure out what all you're going to do with them when you play your games. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that project turned out. Now, as for the scatter terrain, well, I think cutting it apart was a mistake. I probably should have just left it all together and painted it differently, or just added more gubbins to the top, you know, big shooters and stuff like that laying around, choppas. But you know, I've done it and the damage is done. I'm probably going to shelve this one for another time. Plus, scatter terrain really isn't used that much anymore because you can't really climb over it or do much with it. It doesn't really block line of sight. It's kind of useless. It's just pure decoration. So I think I'm going to bin these for now. But I am happy with the barricades. I did actually change the angle on that a little bit. I decided to make the hood look like it had been in a wreck and bash it all up and crack it so that I could get a right angle, because that was really bothering me. So yeah, I'm much happier with that. All right, that's gonna do it for today's episode. I think we've done enough damage. I still have all my digits, and you know, that's not always guaranteed when you're playing around with the saw and the knife. But what we did is we got all the terrain out, inventoried what we had that was painted, inventoried what we had that was, you know, undercoated and kind of like ready for some details, inventoried what we had that was ready for primer, and then looked at our unbuilt stuff. We were able to get some buildings done. I now have all 4 Octarius buildings built, so that was great, getting those other 2 big buildings built. And then same thing with the barricades. Being able to cut those barricades apart, rearrange them in an order that I liked so that they looked different from the other barricades and were a different shape. So now that I have 2 V-shaped ones to add to the 3 straight ones and then the one little guy, I think that that's going to make those work a lot better. So my battlefield for my orcs is coming along. So what you'll see in the next big long form video for terrain is I will undercoat, or I'll primer the Octarius stuff, undercoat it, and then we will paint it to match the rest of the fort, and then I'll show you all the cool fun stuff that the fort itself does. As far as the Mechanicus terrain goes, I'm not sure what to do about that yet. Part of me thinks that what I really need is just some more of it, because I really only have those two pieces and then a bunch of vents. I don't really need any more of the vents, but if I can get another like walkway set so that I could add to like the L piece especially, and maybe chop the ladders off and put the ladders in places that I like better, I think that I stand a much greater chance of actually getting that done. But that is enough to work on a battlefield, because I do have, again, those couple of containers, all of those vents and things. So it gives me a couple of options on terrain as far as my tables go. But then old Big Mek remembered something, and well, you're going to want to see this. Old Big Mek remembered that he still had this. This is the starter set for Warhammer 40k 4th edition. It's called Battle from the Crag. And what it had inside of it was probably the greatest single piece of terrain Games Workshop ever did. And that is the crashed IKEA lander. This thing is wild. I still can't believe that G-Dubs made this thing as a terrain piece and then put it in a starter set. It is still the largest piece of terrain to ever go into a starter set like this. And I mean, this thing, it's like they took a proper Forge World IKEA and cut it up and made this terrain and then molded it again. It's really awesome. So I've been sitting on this since I bought my box, and I've always been too afraid to build it or paint it because I didn't know how I wanted to do it. So this is definitely going to be an episode in and of itself, to finally put the crashed lander together and paint it. My big thing with that is all of my terrain for my orcs is desert style to match the bases on my orcs, right? I've put some dusty stuff on it. You can use it on other boards and it looks okay, but it also doesn't have much ground cover. The Mechanicus I haven't put any kind of basing material on because it doesn't have any bases on anything, which is great. I can use it on any of my terrain boards. Of course, my Imperial Guard are all on snow because they're Valhallans. My Eldar are in a forest jungle world. Kind of Catachan aesthetic, but with Eldar runes in there. And then I haven't painted my Space Marines bases yet, but they're going to be a city fight. They're going to be the classic gray concrete look. The problem with this lander, and I think what's been holding me back from it, and this kind of whole video has been about what's holding me back, is that it's got ground cover on it, right? You see that around the crash landing. So you have to decide what biome you're going in. Is this thing crashed in a desert and this is all, dirt colored? Did this thing crash in the forest and this is all mud and grass and I put little grass tufts everywhere? Or did this crash in the winter and this is all snow? That's the big question. And I really don't know. And I'll probably be running this by my patrons on Patreon to see what they think I should do with the biome on that, so that I can actually get out of my rut. I've been holding on to this thing. When did this come out? Like 2004? I don't even want to admit this. Oh, but it was a really, 2004. I was right. This box is 20 years old in 5 weeks, and I still haven't painted that lander. So I really need your help. If you want to be a part of that, come join us over on Patreon. I'll put a poll up there, and we will let the patrons decide whether the lander is going to be crashed in the desert, the snow, the jungle, or the city. I'll pick one of my 4 armies to match it to, and we will actually paint that sucker up. And that will be a whole episode on its own, as well as the Octarius terrain getting painted is another whole episode on its own. Again, the patrons picked that the next project to work on after Orktober was terrain. It's taken a little while to get started, but we're kicking it into high gear now, and we've got a couple of projects going to get through. And I will work on those probably into December a bit, because my next project hasn't quite arrived yet. And if you want to know what that is before anybody else, again, you should definitely feel like coming over to Patreon and joining us there. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different format, a little bit longer, a little bit more thought process, but I think that a lot of people need to see that because so many YouTube channels are this ultra polished, here's a brand new box we got from GW, I built it, I painted it, you're done. And real life doesn't work like that. Real life is you hold on to something for 20 years because you're unsure of what to do with it, or you've built something 5 years ago and kind of painted it but haven't really because you realize you don't like how it turned out, or you build half of something because you get distracted, or you know it's too similar to the other one and you don't want matching things. So these are all thought process things that came up in this video that I thought were pretty good breakthroughs, and I was really excited to share them with you. If you liked what you saw, please click the like button below or join us in the comments section. If you didn't like it, same thing, let me know what you'd rather see instead. But if you do like the channel, I would appreciate you subscribing, and if you really like the channel, I would love to see you over on our Patreon to help make decisions on what is going to happen with all this stuff moving forward here on the channel. So again, this has been The Red Ones Go Faster. I am old Big Mek, and until next time, wog on! Wog! I'm Gary. Big Mek's sick, so this is The Red Ones Go Faster. Oh. Wog! I'm Gary. Big Mek's sick, so this is The Red Ones Go Faster. Oh.